So wait another minute, then we'll start.
Yes, Prabhu.
Okay. Om Ajnanatimirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Sri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahaguna Raghunatam Vitantam Sajivam Sadvaitam Sarvahutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padam Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishaka Vikamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dina Bandhu Jagapate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchan Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Rishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Panchakalpa Tarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhye Vachapatitanam Bhavanibhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Okay, so a lot of people are either dropping out or they're late. So 26 of us here. Is there a special holiday today?
Not really, Prabhu. I guess it was raining pretty heavy last evening. So maybe there's some delay because of that.
That would be an interesting excuse because of rain. Anyway, the only reason I'm curious is because I have, important thing to say at the beginning of the class. But anyway, as they say, if you snooze, you lose. So, so we heard last week just a list of the 64 items of bhakti, angas of bhakti, and now we're going to be starting to go into the various items and a little details about them. And I think it's important to begin by remembering that earlier we said, because remember, this is still the first few chapters were Samanya Bhakti, general Bhakti, about the 6 characteristics of Bhakti, and Anyabhilashita Sunyam Jnana Karma Navritam, that what is pure devotional service. And we also heard that the essence of, and then now we're in the Sadhana Bhakti chapters, and specifically Vaidhi Sadhana Bhakti, the regulated devotional service. And more people are joining. Please be on time from now on. You're 3 minutes late, some of you. And we want to remember that the essence is Smartavya Satatam Vishnu Vismartavya Najatuchit Sarva Vidhi Nishedhashur Etayor Eva Kinkaram, that the essence is to be focused on remembering Krishna. And of course, remembering Krishna favorably, remembering Krishna with great appreciation, with great gratitude, with great knowledge, and ultimately with great affection and love. And Sarva Vidhi Nishedhashur, all the vidhis and nishedhas, all the do's and don'ts, which we're hearing about here, are kinkaras, they're servants of that principle. So you will remember also in the nectar of instruction that we studied this word niyamagraha and niyamagraha, right? And niyamagraha, you could say one way to translate it is too much affection for the rules. And niyamagraha is too little affection for the rules. So when there's niyamagraha, when there's too much affection, what that means is that when following a rule lessens our thinking of Krishna. Right? You're so absorbed in the rule itself that you're actually not thinking of Krishna. It's like what is that saying? You don't see the forest from the trees. You don't see the big picture that we're supposed to be remembering Krishna. And you just get so into, is my tilak exactly right or not? Not that there's anything wrong with putting on nice tilak, but the point is, if you think that by putting a nice tilak, you're going to be, and you're so absorbed in the tilak that you forget the purpose behind it, right? Which is to remember, we're supposed to be saying Om Keshavaya Namaha, that we remember Om Narayana Nama, Om Madhavaya Nama, Om Govindaya Nama, all the different mantras, we're supposed to be remembering Krishna as we do something like putting on tilak. So we're going to be hearing these 64 items of bhakti, and of course there's some that are real principles that you can't do without, like the first 3 that we're going to be discussing today. But we always have to remember the reason behind it, that all of these are parts of sadhana, and the goal of sadhana is to remember Krishna and never forget him. And of course, having niyamagraha, having too little affection for the rules, means that by not following the rules carefully, we're not thinking of Krishna. Okay, so the goal is to think of Krishna as we're performing these different angas of bhakti. Okay, that's so important that I'll say, do you have any questions or comments before we enter into this chapter? All right, I think it's pretty clear, but it's such an important point. It's because we're going to be going through all these details, and what to speak of in the next chapter, where we start talking about all this list of offenses to avoid. We have to remember that we're avoiding these to please Krishna, and so we're fixed on remembering Krishna. Okay, so it really comes super important next week, but even this week as well, or for the next 4 or 5 weeks. Okay. All right, then let us begin. So the first principle is super important. That's why it's number 1, and accepting the shelter of a bona fide spiritual master. So Rupa Goswami is listing the most crucial item first, because if we follow this principle, it opens a door to all the other 63 principles of sadhana, because the spiritual master will instruct us about carrying out the execution of devotional service and the significance of all of them. Right, so the first principle is to clearly understand that the material world is a false shelter, and to feel the urgent necessity for bhakti, for spiritual life, and therefore to seek the shelter and guidance of a bona fide spiritual master. And Prabhupada writes, and you'll remember this from our earlier discussions, the qualification of a spiritual master is that he must have realized the conclusions of the scriptures by deliberation and arguments, and thus be able to convince others of these conclusions. So remember, the Uttama Adhikari is a person who has strong faith and strong knowledge, and that strong knowledge means that they can convince others. And then at the end, Prabhupada writes, one who is fortunate enough to come under the shelter of a bona fide spiritual master is sure to traverse the path of spiritual salvation without any doubt. So accepting the Sri Guru Padashraya, to accept the shelter of the Ado Guru Padashraya, the first thing, Ado, take shelter of a bona fide spiritual master. And this is what, and therefore the 11th canto verse from Prabhupada that tells Nini. So previous to this verse, he was talking about all the problems of the material world. And so he kind of concludes it by, my dear king, please know for certain that in the material world, there's no happiness. It is simply a mistake to think that there's happiness here, because this place is full of nothing but miserable conditions. And then he says, and therefore, seek out a bona fide spiritual master for initiation. Okay, questions, comments on this?
Hare Krishna, Prabhu Dandavat.
Yes, Prabhu.
Prabhu, the question on accepting a bona fide spiritual master, again, one of the comments I had made in very earlier sessions when we started the course. We are from Bangalore, and there is a big Ritvik movement that happens from Bangalore.
Really? I never heard of it.
Very often there is a question, query, discussions that happen around this point. Because see, there are many times where the Ritvik temple people do approach us or talk to us on things like this. And they also talk about that they don't deny accepting a spiritual master or guru, but it always comes to getting a, I forget the term now. Ritvik guru or the representative guru as they talk.
Right. Yeah.
How do you understand? I forget the term. I'm sorry right now.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about, though. Yeah, I used to know it because yeah. Go ahead. So, what's your question?
So question is, Prabhu, how do we talk about a physical Shiksha Guru versus the representative Guru as they talk about? Because see, of course, when we read the scriptures, we have seen so many places Prabhupada talking about, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu talking about the importance of accepting a Guru.
Right.
And whereas when they argue it out from a perspective that they're not denying not having a Guru, but it's about who the Guru is.
Right. Well, it's, everyone on this call knows the tradition in India is not, even let's forget about Vaishnava, Shiva, whatever, but that your Guru is supposed to be alive, right? When you take initiation from him. I mean, that's pretty much well known. It's so clear that Prabhupada said, the disciple of my disciple will be your, and I'll be the grand spiritual master. There's so many statements from Prabhupada along those lines, and they take this one word totally out of context. That what is the word? Henceforward. These 11 will act as my Ritviks henceforward, and they try to give a different dictionary definition of henceforward. That means like, it doesn't mean that Prabhupada was singing, till after he leaves this world. But it's not at all uncommon. So we talked about this, right? That we weren't talking about when Prabhupada talks about this in the Nectar, because they bring this up in Nectar of Instruction, that one should have an Uttama Adhikari spiritual master, right? And therefore we tried to define Uttama Adhikari as, as also what I just read, that they have strong faith and strong knowledge. They don't have to. It's great if they're Stavaram Jagamam Jaki, that they see Krishna everywhere, but that isn't the qualification that Prabhupada gives. And it's in one sense, it's not unusual that people can't see the greatness. Like, let's say somebody can't, they think, oh, Jaipatak Maharaj, oh, Gopal Krishna, oh, Radhanath Swami, oh, Lokanath Swami, oh, Bhakti Chamaraj, they're, but remember that Prabhupada's own godbrothers didn't recognize Prabhupada. So, Prabhupada is clear as day, right? But it happens a lot that people who know someone well or something, they just think, oh, so they just, oh, he was just a Kacha Grihasta, they would say about Prabhupada, right? Because, but but everyone knows Prabhupada was, the world acharya. But even he wasn't appreciated by his godbrothers. So it's not unusual that some of his disciples won't be recognized, due to some challenges in one's heart or something along those lines. So, I mean, if there's papers that have been written, and anyone could read those if they want to have some of the arguments. Jayadvaita Maharaj has a very good paper where the Ritviks went wrong, and if one feels the need to enter into a discussion with such people, and I think I mentioned that we had some dialogues with devotees from Bangalore, Madhu Pandit, Chanchalapati, and that devotee who took sannyas recently, and then Bhanu Swami was there, and Gopal Krishna Maharaj, Jagapataka Maharaj, Bhakti Vaibhav Maharaj, and Bhakti Chu Maharaj before he left us. And then, of course, COVID happened, and those meetings subsided. But yeah, it's just, I don't know if you ever seen, their Bible is kind of this thing written by Krishnakant Desai. I forget the name of it, but there were so many logical mistakes in it.
The final order,
Final order, yeah. But there's a lot of mistakes in there. Like they would misquote. You can easily misquote Prabhupada. Like you could say, Prabhupada might say something like, sense gratification is great if you're a dog, hog, camel, or ass. And you just leave out the second half of the sentence, and you say, Prabhupada said sense gratification is great. And there would be quotes like that in that final order, just taking half of a sentence, and the other half gives a totally different story. I remember years ago, I tried to apply some logic that I'm familiar with to that, but that was like, my gosh, 25 years ago, maybe 20 years ago. Yeah. So I hope that's helpful. But this is what Rupa Goswami says. Now, we do accept Prabhupada as our spiritual master. He's the founder Acharya of ISKCON. And so he, just like Ramanuja is considered, but that doesn't mean people take an initiation from Ramanuja. We also sometimes say that he's the prominent Shiksha Guru, right? The most prominent Shiksha Guru. And many people feel that that's an appropriate way of, but Diksha, you take from a living person.
So Prabhu, why does these kind of things happen? Like, for example, if Prabhupada's godbrothers were in a way rejecting him or not accepting his position, and even with this Ritvik camp, rejecting the positions of the Diksha Gurus within our system, is it something like the familiarity breeding contempt, or it's like looking very much at a bodily level than a real spiritual level?
It can be a number of things. Just like in the 18th chapter of the Gita, Krishna says that there's 5 factors for action. So not just one thing, but so there could be multiple causes. It could be like you said, it could be it could also be if you kind of reject the whole system and can start your own movement, basically, then you don't have to cooperate with anyone. You could just make your, and cooperation is very difficult to do in Kali Yuga. And, if you're in ISKCON, you have to cooperate, you have to follow the GBC, you have to cooperate with, the Bureau and the divisional councils and all that. And you could just say, oh, I don't need any of that. I could just do whatever I want. Right. So I'm not saying that is, but that may be part of it. I can't say, I can't know people's hearts, but there can be multiple purposes. But, Jayadvaita Swami also wrote an article saying where the Ritviks are right. And he wasn't talking philosophically. He was just saying that, yes, we had problems in the past with this spiritual masters who had difficulties and things like that, and so you could also say that there may be for some people who are in that camp, there may be some semi-valid reasons as well. And things are a kiktri in Kali Yuga, so it could be 4 or 5 different reasons all coming at once. But it is Kali Yuga, so there's naturally conflicts. Okay. All right, so let's carry on. The next one is to accept initiation from the spiritual master and receiving instructions from him. So when we follow when we reject material life and take shelter of a spiritual master, we are to accept him in full faith. And Diksha is the spiritual master's formal acceptance of the disciple's commitment and faith. And this commitment really helps solidify the relationship, because you're relating to a person who's promising to help you in your spiritual life. Prabhupada says that one should learn Srimad Bhagavatam seriously and with all respect and veneration from the spiritual master. So therefore, we can see how Prabhupada is our Shiksha Guru, because we're learning, you pick up the Bhagavatam every day and it has his purports. He's teaching us as a Shiksha Guru, right? So the verse is the next verse with the sage Prabhuda. So then serving the spiritual master with faith and confidence is the next one. So when you execute the second one, that elevates one to the third item, and that's faithfully hearing from the spiritual master, which elevates us to the platform of faithfully serving, loving service to him. And then Rupa Goswami, he supports this with a famous verse where Krishna says that the Acharya should be accepted as the Lord's very self, understanding the importance of the service to the Supreme Lord and knowing the spiritual master to be non-different from him. That is, one second. Oops. Oh, give me a second. My computer is not fully cooperating.
In fact, your video was also freezing in between.
Acha, is it okay now?
Yeah, now it's for the past few minutes, it's okay. Otherwise it was freezing in between.
Oh, if it's bad, then if it continues to be bad, I will reboot my computer. It takes about 3 minutes, then it always gets better. So do let me know, okay?
I'll do that, sure.
If it happens again. I'm just looking up that verse, the actual verse, so that you just give me a second. Oh, Tasmad Guru. No, that's not the one. Anyway, so any questions on these next two?
Hare Krishna, Prabhu. Dandavat Pranam, Prabhu.
Yes, Prabhu.
Prabhu, there are a lot of devotees in ISKCON who follow almost all the regulative principles, Ekadashi, on all of those rituals. But then for a long time, they don't take the shelter of a spiritual master.
Mm-hmm.
What eventually happens if they don't take the shelter of a bona fide spiritual master? Do they connect to the parampara, or can you please?
Well, that's between them and Krishna, ultimately, right? You could say that they are accepting Prabhupada's instructions, and so and they're connected to his society, and they're connected to, they probably have taken shiksha from different devotees. So I think your real question is what happens if you don't take diksha, because it would be pretty hard to follow Ekadasi and do all those things without taking some shiksha, some instructions from someone along the lines. And also in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, and Bhanu Swami also talks about this a lot, that the holy name doesn't wait for diksha. The holy name being so powerful. So if that person is chanting, there's all good for that person. Matter of fact, this is kind of funny, but a devotee who's a fundraiser for a temple, he once told me he tries to not get the congregation to get initiated, because once they get initiated, they stop giving donations to the temple and give to their guru. But that be that as it may. So obviously it's important, Diksha, because we're reading about it here, right? And right in the very beginning of the 64 items. That doesn't negate Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami's statement in the Chaitanya Charitamrita that the holy name doesn't wait for initiation. We hear that even a person hears the Harinam party one time, and they may be enough to give them a human birth in the next life. So what to speak of someone who's doing japa and taking darshan and associating with devotees and all this, but hasn't taken diksha. And there's, in one sense, we could say there's no rush. Does anyone know how many years it took Srila Prabhupada before he took diksha?
About 14 years.
7 years. Let's see. He met Prabhupada. He met Srila Bhaktisiddhanta in 22. And what year did he take initiation?
And it was 33 or 36.
Yeah, I think it was 33.
Yeah.
So like 11 years. Yeah, 1933, according to, yes, thank you, Brajeshri Panmataji. Very good. We have a person who knows a lot of things there. Very good. So in that sense, of course, in ISKCON, we usually say 1 year, right? Or something like that, there's right, you say Prabhupada's pranam mantras first, then you take the spiritual master, then, etc. In the early days of ISKCON, it was 6 months for first initiation, 2 years for second, and 4 years for sannyas. Bas.
Prabhu, if I can disturb, your video is freezing again. If you don't mind, if you could reboot, it will be.
Okay, so don't go away.
Yeah, I will all do that.
I'll be back. Hare
Sure.
Krishna.
For everybody, maybe. Hare Krishna Prabhu, actually it is not freezing
Prabhu,
for
it's
me.
not happening for me.
It's happening for everyone.
Fine here.
Yes, for me also, I don't find any problem. Probably it's in your PC
Yes.
could be the problem.
Yeah, even for me, it's not happening. It's completely going smoothly here.
Okay, then probably it's my internet then.
That's what I think.
Vardha Krishna Prabhu, if you, maybe you can speak something in the meantime as he joins. Prabhu joins back. Vardha Krishna Prabhu, Hari Bol.
Hare Krishna.
Prabhu. Maybe you can share something, Prabhu, in the meantime.
Prabhu, probably forgive me to interrupt. I would like to I raised one question to Prabhu long back. Somehow we did not get an opportunity to talk to you later. It's only a supplementary question to what Arvind and Prabhu raised. Prabhu, I want to ask this question. Suppose you know well that I have not so far been initiated, but still I love Krishna to the extent possible. I render service to Lord Krishna, and I observe whatever devotees, many of our devotees, ISKCON devotees, mostly, if not all, I follow, but still I am not initiated. Then, Prabhu, in that case, the service is rendered with that kind of people who are not initiated, but faithfully follow so many things, like our ISKCON devotees. Will Lord still be pleased with our services?
Of course.
Or is there any discrimination between initiated and non-initiated devotees, Prabhu? I want to.
Of course, and though, it doesn't mean that we should neglect Rupa Goswami's teachings. So, I'm sorry, was Varda Krishna Prabhu speaking? I'm sorry.
That's fine, Prabhu. It's a general question. We thought we'll just talk about it while you took a while to log in again. But it's fine. I would like you to continue to answer.
Yeah. They're not exclusive. We should. If I could just mute you just while we're. There we go. Yes, Krishna will remember anyone who renders service, especially to his ISKCON society and to the devotees in ISKCON. There's no loss. I was just reading in Giri Raj Maharaj's book that Mr. Sethi, a very wealthy gentleman in Bombay, was building residence for the devotees. And Prabhupada said, he wasn't initiated, but he said, you're building residence for devotees, and Krishna will build you a residence in the spiritual world. So that's all good. And it doesn't mean that we should ever neglect Rupa Goswami's teachings or the Bhagavatam's teachings. That one should, when they're ready and they can take the vows, that they take initiation from a bona fide spiritual master. So both are there. Okay. Were there any other questions? Maybe we should carry on. I have to open up my document here. Take a minute because my computer, there we go. And then I have to open up database. Okay, database is opening. Sorry to give you a detailed account of my computer situation. Nectar of Devotion, chapter 7. Okay, so then the next one is following in the footsteps. Oh wait, did we do? Yeah, we did service. Yes. Following the footsteps, and this is important. Following footsteps of saintly persons, and Prabhupada writes, the scripture known as Brahma Yamala states as follows: if someone wants to pose himself as a great devotee without following the authority of the revealed scriptures, then his activities will never help him to make progress in devotional service. Instead, he will simply create disturbances for the sincere students of devotional service. Those who do not follow the principles of revealed scriptures are generally called sahajiyas, those who have imagined everything to be cheap, who have their own concocted ideas and who do not follow the scriptural injunctions. Such persons are simply creating disturbances in the discharge of devotional service. So they're a little bit like the Niyamagraha people who don't follow rules. And so this point is also saying that we don't only follow our own spiritual master, but other bona fide sadhus and acharyas in our parampara, in our disciplic succession. And if we don't do that, the Shruti Smriti Puranati, that's the verse that Prabhupada is paraphrasing here. If we don't do that, then it's not devotional service. And then the very interesting example given is that of Lord Buddha. And you saw that there were several paragraphs about Lord Buddha, that even though he's the supreme personality of God in himself, his followers are generally not practicing pure devotional service because Buddha, for various reasons, he did not strictly present the scriptures according to the Guru Parampara. Okay, and then Prabhupada writes very nicely that because they followed him, they indirectly they were tricked into devotional service to Lord Buddha. So yes, so Buddhists are generally not theistic. They don't believe in God. And so I went on the website. It's their big website, buddhanet.net. And I have to tell you, I was not very impressed with the 3 reasons they give for not being believers in God. You know, the first one was that primitive man, their point was that people became religious out of fear. And that's because primitive people, they lived in a dangerous and hostile world where there's wild animals, etc. Now, that's obviously not the same scripture that we're reading, because we hear about a very sophisticated world that of Hastinapur and of Dwarka, etc., thousands, if not millions of years ago. But that whole idea that God, that people just created God because they were so fearful, well, that's certainly not Gaudiya Vaishnavas, because our impetus is not fear, our impetus is love, it's bhakti. And the second reason they give is that there's no evidence to support that God exists. Well, again, it proves that they're not following the Vedic, following the Vedas. And you could just as easily say there's no proof that God doesn't there's no proof that God doesn't exist. It's just not a powerful argument. And then the third one was that belief is not necessary to be a good person. So, I mean, we could get into that whole thing, but really we say that really a good person is someone who actually follows God. So it's just interesting that the whole appearance of Buddha and people do get something out of Buddhism if you actually follow it strictly, if you follow the kind of, even what's popular today, mindfulness and what do they call it? Vipassana meditation and things, because it gives people it helps them come to a mode of goodness, and it gives them some glimpse of Brahman realization, a glimpse of it, at least. If they're more Paka Buddhists, then more than a glimpse, perhaps. So they do get something, but we would say, right, whatever happiness is there from those two things, Sattva or Brahman, is like the water in the hoof print of a calf compared to the ocean of the nectar of devotion. So any questions about this point about following the footsteps of saintly persons, Sahajiyas or Buddhists?
Hare Krishna Prabhu, regarding following the footsteps of saintly persons, sometimes the line between following and imitation can be very, very thin.
Correct.
How do we keep caution on something like that, when we are imitating and when we are following?
Usually by association, with seniors and asking about that. You're right that like we might think, well, I'm ready to start practicing Raganuga Bhakti. right? But probably better is to pray to Krishna. Oh, Krishna, when will I have spontaneous attraction for you? When will I have spontaneous? That would be probably a better thing than trying to imitate someone on a higher level. At the same time, though, yad yad acharati sheshas tatareva tarojana, that we get inspired by the example of others. So it's not that hard, Prabhu. If you're, let's say you see a devotee, a senior devotee in our movement really absorbed in japa. Well, that's obviously something we want to try to imitate, right? And at the same time, I'm trying to think of an example of something that we would. Can you think of an example of, or can anyone think of an example of something that might be imitation instead of following the footsteps? A practical example.
Raghunath goes to street, only garbage is left out.
What's that? I think Varada Krishna Prabhu was going to say something.
A lot of people prematurely, excuse me, opt to retire and live in places like Vrindavan while they're just not ready for it.
That's a very good example. Thank you. I wasn't thinking of that, but that's an excellent example. Yeah. So it's said sometimes to spend 3 days in the holy Dham. I think initiated devotees can do more than that, but that's a good example. You quit your job, you move to Braj, and then you hang out at the restaurant all day talking prajalpa, for example, right? Because you don't really have a taste yet for, because really going to Vrindavan means hearing and chanting about Krishna. And I'll take that warning from Varada Krishna Prabhu, because I do have a plan to move back to Vrindavan.
No, that's not what I meant.
Yeah.
You're a Vrindavan man. You were there. You've done it. You've shown. You set up the VIHE, and you've eminent services for more than a decade.
But that's a good example. It's a very good example, Varada.
Yeah, I'm talking about those who leave everything here, go there, and then again restart some. They say no, some small business and this and that, and before they know anything, they're sucked up into this world of business. After going there, no, I'm trying to just build some houses for devotees who come from elsewhere, and before you know it, you become a pakka businessman there.
Yeah, good example, very good example. Does that help, Rasa Sindhu?
Yes, Prabhu. Yes, it helps. Thanks a lot.
Right. All right. Any other questions about that point, or about Sahajiyas, or about Buddhists? There's not so many Buddhists in India. Right? Prabhupada writes that Sankaracharya drove him beyond the borders of India.
Hare Krishna Prabhu. It's surprising that in spite of being so learned, how is that Sahajiyas and yogis fail to recognize the hand of Krishna in acts, whereas a neophyte devotee can recognize it?
You mean, are you saying, well, Sahajas generally are not very learned, generally. The Prabhupada even writes that they don't want to read books. They think that books are for neophytes. That's, I think, the exact wording in the Chaitanya Charitamrita. Somebody knows that quote. So they think that, they kind of compare that. They think that reading books is like gyan, and that bhaktas are supposed to be devoid of, that kind of dry gyan. But of course, we're, reading books about Krishna is not like that. So that it's not so much that they, that's the problem, that they don't Shruti Shmiti Puranadi Pancharatra. They're not following the Shastra, and they're taking, generally speaking, of course, there's different kinds of sahajas, but they're taking the pastimes of Krishna cheaply. And as Prabhupada would say, they, so someone, you can imagine, we're so trained by Prabhupada, right? And his books and by his disciples to understand how great God is. We study Bhagavad Gita, Ham Sarvasya Prabhavo, Mata Sarvam Pravartate, I'm the source of all spiritual material worlds. Everything emanates from me. And we study the first 9 cantos before we enter the 10th canto. Or we read, Varda Prabhu, I'm just putting you on mute, but when you want to speak, just go off of mute. But sometimes there's like noise when you're,
but I'll wait for you to unmute.
Okay. And Prabhupada's Krishna book is written in such a way that you can't become a Sahaja by reading it. Even the Rasa Leela, he keeps on reminding us Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So the whole idea of the Bhagavatam is by the time you get to the 10th canto, then you see that Krishna's Nara Leela, his human-like pastimes, he's still, you remember that he's God. But Sahajas go straight to the 10th canto and they take it cheaply. So I hope that's helpful. Go ahead, Varda Krishna Prabhu, please go off of mute.
See, in recent times, we are noticing that there's a new genre of devotees who call themselves, quote unquote, Kirtaniyas. Now, they don't come, they're not quite really in the traditional mold, in the sense that, I mean, either with the way they look or the kind of the hairdos that they have or the dress they wear, but they call themselves Kirtan. Where would you place them? I mean,
it's hard to know somebody's heart. So I would, I'm not sure where I would place them because they're individuals and they may be, as you're hinting at, maybe they're sahajas or maybe they're, great devotees that you can't tell a book by the cover, so to speak, right? We wouldn't probably make them a head pujari because certain there's certain adhikar for different services in ISKCON, right? You couldn't, or they couldn't take sannyas right away because of their thing. At the same time, some of them we have in our community, Gauravani Prabhu. I don't know if you know him. I know Gauravani has a very strong. Of course, he doesn't dress wildly, really, or anything like that. But he has a very, very strong preaching spirit, and he's brought so many people to Krishna consciousness. But yeah, everyone has their personal relationship with Krishna, and then you have certain standards within a society like ISKCON, right? And so there might be questions about how much should they represent ISKCON, and or anyone, what are the criteria for representing our society, and what is the criteria for doing different services. But Prabhupada would say different things at different times, right? Sometimes he would say, he was really down on the people who chanted Nitai Gaur Radhe Sham Japa Hari Krishna Hari Ram, right? And at other times he'd say, well, they're chanting Hare Krishna, at least they're saying Krishna's name. Or one time he stopped the devotees when they were going Nitai Gaur Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, right? And he would say, no, just chant Hare Krishna. Or even in Vrindavan on Ram Nomi, the devotees were going Sita Ram, Jaya Sita Ram. And he sent Hari Saripu, so tell him to chant Hare Krishna. And then someone tried to complain about Lokanath Maharaj that he's chanting Hari Bol. And Prabhupada said, no, Hari Bol, that's the name for Krishna. So my point being is sometimes it was hard to pinpoint what Prabhupada would say in a different time, a different place, different circumstance, and knowing the heart of the devotee. But is that all right, Varda Krishna?
Yeah, I like that how you prefaced your whole comments. You said that every devotee is an individual and we can't quite really read his heart. But then you see that year on year, they keep pushing the boundaries in the sense that, like I said, it's got to do more with their appearances, their mannerisms, and they want to give themselves these certificates, and somehow you get the feeling that they think that they're above the rest of us, and so they should be given special privileges or
Right,
stuff like that.
right. Yeah, so that's a managerial kind of thing also, isn't it? To decide how to and maybe someone could talk to them and say, listen, we really love the fact that you love kirtan, and we really love the fact that you sing melodiously. Would you be willing to take up some more of the external vesh that was the standard Prabhupada said? Now, I don't know if anyone's ever spoken to them like that, in a respectful way, but in a way to see if they would be more willing to comply. Hard for me to say. I haven't gotten too involved in that conversation. I haven't gotten to that conversation at all.
Nevertheless, I thank you for that note of caution with which you started. That I think is very Vaishnava-like. Thank you.
Okay, anything else? Okay, well, I can see we don't have any Buddhists in the crowd, so that's very good, Bharata Krishna Prabhu.
There's a question in the comment box, chat box.
Oh, there's something, I'm sorry, I didn't see it. Okay, let's see. Does mindfulness have any connection to progressing in Krishna consciousness? Is it a method recommended in scriptures? Many are talking about practicing mindfulness. Yes, thank you. Well, mindfulness, if we wanted to kind of put it in the context of our tradition, would have some very strong similarities with pranayama. Because most of mindfulness, the idea behind mindfulness is to be very much in the present, right? To be fixed in the present, not thinking about the future, not thinking about the past. And that's, Krishna said this 5,000 years ago. Na sochati, na kankshati. So Krishna started the mindfulness movement way before, the yoga people of today. He said, seriously, that's the verse. Na sochati, na kankshati. Do not hanker for the future. Do not lament for the past. It's right there in Bhagavad Gita. And in mindfulness, the main thing that they try to, often one of the most important things they usually focus on is just focus on the breath. And there's a reason for that, because you can't think of 5 breaths from now. You can't think of 3 breaths that you had before. You have to be pretty much in the present if you're focusing on the breath. And pranayama is focusing on the breath, right? And we know from the 3rd canto of the Bhagavatam, or I keep forgetting if it's the 3rd or 4th canto. I think it's the 3rd canto, that Prabhupada talks highly about pranayama, and that there's a connection between the mind and the breathing. We know that, right? Even in a movie, they'll say, take a few deep breaths, right? Because they know that calms you down. So there is definitely a connection between mindfulness and Krishna, and at least the yoga practices, right? Yam, niyam, asana, pranayama, right? And so we can do mindfulness in 2 ways. We can also focus on the breath, like in and I think I've mentioned before, some devotees find that it helps their japa. Not that you have to do pranayama to do japa. I'm not saying that, don't misquote me. But some people find that it quiets their mind, puts them a little more in sattva guna, and they do a few minutes of pranayama, and they find that they can focus more on their japa. And then our mindfulness is totally, when you think about what they talk about for mindfulness, it's perfect to adopt that for japa. To be present with the holy name. Don't think about, how many times do we think, I still have 4 rounds left. That's going to take a half hour. Maybe I can chant a little faster, right? Oh my God, it's so late and I still have 11 rounds. Oh, Krishna, right? Instead, we're supposed to just think about the one mantra that we're chanting right now and hear that mantra. So we take mindfulness and then apply it to Krishna consciousness. So we could tell people we're totally into mindfulness. So here, take these japa beads and be totally mindful as you're chanting Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. So, and also know that they are getting something that's right out of the Shastra. They're getting some, at least sattva, and maybe a little glimpse of Brahman if they're totally absorbed. But so, and then we should just say, wow, if I could apply that to Krishna's holy name, wow, that'll be amazing. Okay, I hope that's helpful. I'm not sure how to Saidhanam Sanghi. Very good question. Okay, let us carry on. So in inquiring about eternal religious principles in the Naradiya Purana, it is said, if one is actually very serious about devotional service, then all of his purposes will be served without any delay. So isn't this nice that that so many of these 64 items of sadhana bhakti are practical ways to increase our devotional service. So here's one simple way to make note of questions that may arise during a class or studying, and then asking a senior devotee. That itself, that asking a question is bhakti, right? So Saidanam Prabhu has practiced bhakti by putting that question in the chat, for example.
Mataji Prabhu, she's Mataji.
Oh, it's Mataji, sorry, I didn't know, okay. So that's very nice, isn't it? Making questions is bhakti. Okay, then being prepared to give up everything material for Krishna's satisfaction is the next one. And yes, that's one way to practice pure devotional service, is to do everything for Krishna's service, and not being absorbed in our own material happiness, but just focus on Guru and Krishna's satisfaction. And that is a very strong principle of bhakti. And so being prepared to just do whatever it takes to please Krishna. If someone says, you get to wash pots for Krishna, and you don't really like washing pots very much, but it's for Krishna, so you say, oh, this is great. I get to do this for Krishna. Somebody have a question, Bharata Krishna Prabhu?
Prabhu, see, I would think it's a little bit of a digression, but I can't think of someone better than you to ask this question. I'd like some attention on chapter 2, verse 46 of the Bhagavad Gita, if you don't mind, because it's in the context of reading scripture, understanding, etc.
246. Okay, let us go there. 1 second. Oops. My database just crashed. So I'll go online and do it that way. Krishna Krishna. 246. That's what I thought it was. All the purposes. Yavan arte udapane sarvatra samplutodake. Tavan sarveshu vedeshu ramanasya vijanataha. All purposes served by a small well can at once be served by a great reservoir of water. Similarly, all the purposes of the Vedas can be served by one who knows the purpose behind them. Okay, just give me a second to get my other database up and running. Oh, it crashed again. That's weird. That usually doesn't happen. Let me try one last time. Hopefully it's going to open. Krishna Krishna. All right, so you probably know that in India, you'll find still in the villages that there can be, in a Paka village at least, each well is used for a specific purpose. One, is for drinking water, one is for washing clothes, one's for, cleaning utensils or for bathing. But all of those activities can be performed on the side of a lake or a river. If it's a source of fresh water, and you don't need to go to from well to fulfill those purposes. So in the same way, one who's Vijanataha has knowledge of the Vedic purpose, they need only do bhakti for Krishna's pleasure. And the performance of that, or in this case, it's Buddhi Yoga is a specific term in this verse, that satisfies all the purposes of the Karma Kanda section, the Jnana Kanda section, the Yoga section, and all that. It's all satisfied by performing bhakti. So that's my understanding of that verse. But what was your specific question about that verse?
My thing was that I don't know what's being alluded to or hinted. Is Krishna by chance saying, no need to read every single verse that comes under the umbrella of Vedic scripture, or just what is being implied?
Absolutely, that's absolutely what's being implied, because so much of the Vedic scriptures are karma kanda, and then I think it's like 96% or something, or either karma kanda or jnana kanda, and so but the Bhagavad Gita is specifically about bhakti, and therefore Prabhupada said we only need these 4 books really: Nectar of Devotion, Bhagavad Gita, Srimad Bhagavatam, and Chaitanya Charitamrita, and that's sufficient to go back home, back to Godhead. And especially, Bhagavatam was extremely dear to Lord Chaitanya.
I like that this thing about how different wells in different villages, in villages serve different purposes, but all of that can be served by going to the reservoir.
Yes.
Something like that. I never looked at it, this verse in that fashion, but still a bit of a mystery for me. What is Krishna referring to?
Well, you have to remember the context. So, in the verse before this, he said, Trigunya Vishaya Veda Nistrigunya Bhavarjuna, right? He said the Vedas mainly deal with the subject of the 3 modes of material nature. So most of the Vedas are not transcendental, O Arjuna. And he says, become Nistrigunya Bhavarjuna, become transcendental to the 3 modes. Be free from those dualities and the anxieties for gain and safety, and establish in the self. So this is the context. And by the way, it's the first time that and then the verse before that, men of small knowledge are very much attracted to the flowery words of the Vedas, the Karma Kanda, which recommend various fruitive activities for elevation to the heavenly planets, good birth, power, and so forth. Being desirous of sense gratification, opulent life, they say there is nothing more to be had than this.
So can we conclude that, or shall we infer that Krishna is saying, just hear what I'm saying, this is the sum and substance or the essence of the Vedas?
Yes.
Don't bother.
Yeah, okay. and then he confirms that in 15:15. Vedaisya Sarvayar Aham Eva Vedyo, by all the Vedas, I'm to be known. And then again in the 17th chapter, we hear all about the different activities in the modes of material nature. But then the last verse says the goal is to perform everything for Om Tat Sat, which is the spiritual goal, not within the modes of material nature. So the Bhagavad Gita, in one sense, it's a revolutionary book. Krishna, at the end, he says, Sarva Dharmam Parityagya Mamekam Sharanam Braja. Okay.
Oh, thank you, Prabhu. You gave me so many new perspectives. Thank you.
That's so sneak. Okay, now let's get back to and I hope my computer doesn't crash. Nectar Devotion, chapter 7. Okay. Residing in a sacred place. Now this is of these 64, there's going to be Panch Anga Bhakti, 5 that are considered the most potent, and this is one of them, is residing in a sacred place. And so there's glorification of Dwarka, that if you live there for 6 months, 1 month, or even 1 fortnight, you can be elevated to the Vaikuntha Lokas. And then Purushottama Kshetra, which I'm sure many of you have been to these places, that the significance of that cannot be properly described. Even the demigods are lining up to be in Jagannath Puri. And Jagannath Puri is an interesting place because it kind of, I think we may have mentioned this last week, it kind of exists on 3 different levels. The first level is what a lot of people go there for these days is a beach chutti, and just it's a nice place to be. And then the second one is about the level of Jagannath, and they go there to take darshan of Jagannath. Of course, I'm not allowed to take darshan, but I can take darshan of Patita Pavana Jagannath, at the Simadwara. There's but then the Gauriyas, the highest part of Puri is Mahaprabhu's Leela, and visiting Haridas Thakur's Samadhi and Bhaktivinoda Thakur's house, and Tota Gopinath, and the the Parvat that Lord Chaitanya mistook for Giriraj, and so there's these 3 levels of Jagannath Puri. And then there's even the description of Naimisharanya, that any place near the banks of the Ganges, because the Ganga is always carrying the flavor of the tulsi offered at the lotus feet of Krishna. And elsewhere, Prabhupada will say that one who, even a non-devotee who visits Vrindavan, feels some separation from Krishna. So I always take some solace, because my mother was not a devotee, but she lived the end of her life in Vrindavan and passed away in Vrindavan. I always think that she was very fortunate to have that in her life at that time in Braj. So, and then we also can say practical application of this is to make our homes holy places. To either we have an altar, whether it's pictures or whether it's murtis, and to keep our home clean and keep it as a tirtha, a holy place, a place where an ashram, where spiritual activities take place. And so we can, we're fortunate we have a stone from Govardhan that was given to us by Indradumna Maharaj. And so we worship Giriraj every day here in our house in Washington, D.C. So even though we're far away from Govardhan Hill, we try to at least have some semblance of Giriraj, of Govardhan, Giri Govardhan, here in a far off corner of the universe. Any questions, comments on that?
Hare Krishna Prabhuji, Tatvat Pranam. I wanted to share about the Buddhist. So one of my friend is Tenzin. She's from Tibet. She's Buddhist, and it happens that the last 2 weeks I spoke to her after 8 to 9 years. So she's working in New York, and she said that nowadays she's hearing from Sadhguru, and she wanted to know about how is Sadhguru. So, but I don't know about Sadhguru. I told her about ISKCON and how we follow and everything, and she wanted to know about a ISKCON center there. So I told her, but I don't know about Sadhguru. So
I haven't really studied him I don't think he, I've read some things that didn't impress me about his level of spirituality and his faith in God. But I haven't done a study. I can tell you one thing, he is excellent at social media. He puts ISKCON to shame. We are so far behind in our social media presence and in our internet presence, and he's really a good marketer. But you did the right thing. You told her about ISKCON, and we have a center in Brooklyn. We have one in Manhattan, the Bhakti Center. So hopefully she'll find some real bona fide spiritual knowledge by visiting one of those places. But has anyone here studied Sadhguru? And I haven't taken the time to do that.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. You were correct in saying that he is very good at its social media. That is the only best part. And a lot of like a concept of eating without onion garlic, and many times it happens we face challenges like convincing people about onion garlic, but he has put all these things in a very flowery and nice words and convinced a lot of people to not have. Only his way of communication skills are perfect, rest is not at all.
Yeah, I mean, I just did a Google search, and it says he's neither a theist or an atheist. He says an atheist and a theist are not different. One believes there is God and another believes there is no God. Both of them are believing something they do not know. So you can imagine Srila Prabhupada, what he would say. If you don't know, then why are you talking? Prabhupada would probably be very, very happy with that kind of statement. Then how can you be a guru? He would say, I'm pretty sure Prabhupada would say, how can you be a guru if you don't know? Ask me. And then we say, Prabhupada, is there a God? He says, yes, there's God. And I see him face to face, and I can help you see him face to face. That's what Srila Prabhupada would say. So just that one thing that I just, did a 10-second Google search, and maybe he says some nice things, just like the time, I think I told you the story of the time Prabhupada was in Kobe in Japan, and he was at a program where Mayavadi was speaking. And for the first 20 minutes, Prabhupada just quietly listened to the Mayavadi. It was fine. But then he told his devotees actually to stop the Mayavadi from speaking. He was a sannyasi. Just stop him. And then the devotees asked later what happened. And because it was in Hindi, the devotees didn't know what was being said. He said at first he was speaking, okay, you're not this body, like that. But then he introduced Panchopasanam, and therefore I could not tolerate. So in other words, he said some of the things he said were okay, and some of the things not okay. So, but I just typed in Sadhguru theist, and I know that one statement Prabhupada would jump on. You call yourself a guru, but you don't know if there's God, right? But he might say some things that are right. Even a broken clock is right twice a day, right? So Hare Krishna. So we don't spend much time putting other people down. We try to just positively teach what Krishna teaches in Bhagavad Gita. That's our main. And Prabhupada even said that. He said you don't need to ever criticize anybody by name. Ask them what is their philosophy, and then you can correct their philosophy without having to make an attack on the person. So I don't, Sadhguru may be a wonderful person, may not. I have no idea. I've never met him, but that statement is not a very powerful one. That Okay, Mataji, is that all right? Is that all right? Did I offend anyone? What I just said? Okay, and if there's nothing else, we can carry on, accepting only what is necessary. And here Prabhupada says, gives some good instruction about japa, right? The purport is that one should not neglect following the principles of devotional service, nor should one accept the rulings of devotional service, which are more than what he can easily perform. For example, it may be said that one should chant the Hare Krishna mantra at least 100,000 times daily on his beads. But if this is not possible, then we must minimize his chanting according to his own capacity. Generally, we recommend our disciples to chant at least 16 rounds on their japa beads daily, and this should be completed. But if one is not even able to chant 16 rounds, then he must make it up the next day. Very practical teaching. And then at the end, it is better if one fixes up a regulated principle according to his own ability, and then follow that vow without fail. That will help him advance in spiritual life. So that I've always taken that sentence. So if someone is like a new person coming, I say, don't do 2 rounds one day, 20 rounds the next day, 5 rounds one day. Start with whatever you want to start with and do that every day. If it's 2 rounds, okay, do 2 rounds every day. Then you go up to 4 every day, then 6 or whatever it is for that individual. But don't jump around, but gradually come up, to the standard of at least 16 rounds. And do it at your own pace. Krishna will give you a taste and then you'll want to do it. So any questions on that? Okay. Observe fasting on Ekadasi. And Prabhupada makes it very clear. The basic principle is not just to fast, but to increase one's faith and love for Govinda or Krishna. The real reason for observing fasting on Ekadasi is to minimize the demands of the body and to engage our time in the service of the Lord by chanting or performing similar service. The best thing is to do on fasting days is to remember the pastimes of Govinda and hear his holy name constantly. So Prabhupada was very practical about Ekadasi. If you can do Nirjala Ekadasi and still have the energy to do your service, fantastic, right? If you become very weak and all you're doing is thinking about how weak you are and you're not thinking of Krishna, that's not practical. So maybe you are still a pretty good tapasvi, so you just take water. No, but that's not possible. Okay, then take fruit. That's not possible. Then at least no grains or beans. Right? That's the, so you can take full prasadam on Ekadasi if you need to do your service. Prabhupada was very practical. If you're, you know what I mean? But I have found, on the other hand, just to present the other side, I have found that, let's say I wanted to do Nirjal every Ekadasi, or just Jal every Ekadasi, nothing else. The first 2 times, the first month would probably be pretty hard, but after that, I found that my body gets used to it, and it becomes easier in subsequent months, and it's not such a hard thing to do. But at least Prabhupada's instruction to Burijan Prabhu was to be practical and, do the needful, and then be able to chant, do your service, chanting, reading, going to work, etc. Any questions or comments on that?
A comment on a lighter note, Prabhu. Govinda on Ekadashi and Govindas on Dwadashi.
Very good. Very good. Very good. Respecting the banyan tree. Now, this is not just the banyan trees. The Skanda Prana is directed that a devotee should offer water to the tulasi plant and amalaki tree. He should offer respects to the ashwata, the cows, the brahmanas, and should serve the Vaishnavas by offering them respectful obeisances and meditating upon them. So it's serving Vaishnavas, serving Brahmins, serving cows. Can't remember if it's Balade Vidyabhusan or it's Jiva Goswami. He says that you can please the cows by taking care of them, and that you can gently scratch the body of the cow. They like that very much. Offer them a handful of green grass and very respectfully circumambulate them with one's right side kept towards her. And that is the way to respect the cow. So next time you see a cow, scratch them, they like it. See if you can find some grass and circumambulate her. Okay. And then giving up the company of non-devotees. So this, this is very interesting. Prabhupada says that the Lord Chaitanya was once asked by one of his household devotees what the general behavior of a Vaishnava should be. And this is the first thing he said. Asat Sanga Tyag E Vaishnavachar. Sri Sangi Eka Sadhu Krishna Abhakta Ar. That one should give, and he says there's two kinds of non-devotees. One class is against the supremacy of Krishna, and the other is too materialistic. And those, in other words, those who are after material enjoyment and those who are atheistic or Mayavadis, their company should be avoided. So we should want to associate with devotees. Tandara Charana Sevi Bhakta Sanivas Janame Janame Hoy E Abilas. My only desire, birth after birth, is Tandara Charana Sevi, to live with devotees and serve them. So we try not to associate with non-devotees. That means we don't reveal our hearts. Now, if you're at work and people are not devotees, well, you can't say, "Oh, I can't associate with." But we don't open our hearts fully to such people. We open our hearts to devotees. We have Jiva Doya. We do try to bring them prasad, people at work prasadam or invite them to the temple or whatever. But we don't want to intimately. The point being, here's the point. A devotional mindset, a devotional mood is a very special mood. And not everyone has it. And we want to, and it's right now in its infancy in us, and we want it to blossom. And so we have to protect it because it is a very special thing. It's people have their hearts are so closed and they're so careful, and the devotee's heart is, they're trying to open it up. They'll open up the lotus of their heart and trust Krishna and trust the devotees. And so, you're with trustworthy devotees, you can open your heart like that. But if you're with people who have very closed hearts, their association closes our heart. And we want our heart to be very open to Krishna. So it's a very specific mood, especially of a Gaudiya Vaishnava. And we get that mood by associating with others who have that mood. And those who don't have that mood, we're what was it, Hiranyakashipu or Ravana, I can't remember which demon. They said that, we are like, we're like a, what's the word? Crystal. If you put a crystal into something that is blue, the crystal will look blue, right? And if you put it to something that's green, it'll look green. And so that association is like that. We very much pick up the association of others. And therefore, you've heard me say, Krishna consciousness is caught as much as it's taught. You learn it by seeing and by associating with devotees. So that's why this is such an important principle for us. It doesn't mean we spit at someone who's not a devotee or anything like that, but we don't open our heart to them in the same way that we do to a devotee. Any questions or comments on that?
Prabhu, in the purport here, there is a quote or a reference to Vishnu Rahasya, which says that, similarly in the Vishnu Rahasya, there is a statement to the effect that one should prefer to embrace a snake, a tiger, or an alligator rather than associate with persons who are worshippers of various demigods. So does it lead to disrespect to the demigods? Because we have often talked about that we don't follow, but we certainly should not be disrespecting the demigods.
Well, you didn't read the last 7 words. and who are impelled by material desires, right? So, though we have to be careful about that. We want to, in the Srimad, let's read the next one. In the Srimad Bhagavatam, it is instructed that one may worship a certain demigod if he is desirous of achieving some material gain. For example, one is advised to worship sun god, a beautiful wife, Uma, advanced education, Saraswati. There's a similar list of worshippers of all demigods according to different material desires. But all these worshippers, although they appear to be very good devotees of demigods, are still considered to be non-devotees. They cannot be accepted as devotees. So we have to be careful. It's a good point. We want to be careful. We have total respect for the demigods. We just don't consider them the Supreme Lord. And we don't want to get into a, I'll scratch your back, you scratch mine kind of mood. Remember, I just mentioned how we want to protect that mood of bhakti in our heart. And, going to a demigod and says, I'm going to perform this yagya and make sure that my son gets into IIT, right? The interesting thing is that if you approach Krishna for the same thing, you get purified, right? Just like we know, people make business deals with Balaji, right, in Tirupati, isn't it? Right? If I make 20 crore profit this year, Krishna, I'll give you 10%. And they actually do it. They take 2 crores and they throw it in the hundi there, right? In Tirupati. It's amazing what people throw in the hundi there sometimes. If they're really rich, I've had people ask, I didn't do it, but they said, listen, I've chartered a whole airplane for my whole family members because, business was so great this year and Balaji helped me. But at least they're approaching Balaji, and therefore the akama sarvakama moksha kama udarati trivena bhakti yogena yajeta purusham pram. That whether one has all material desires or moksha desires liberation or no material desires, they should worship Krishna. So very good point. We may not want to associate with people who are approaching demigods from material, but we respect the demigods. Brajeshwari Pran Mataji.
Hare Krishna Prabhu, Dandavats Pranam. It's regarding the first 5 principles we spoke about the spiritual master. So it's always easy to accept at the neophyte state or in my state about the spiritual master glories. Like, Prabhupada did, he went to West and preached and established. There were so many difficulties in that phase, but we see whether it's a Ramanujacharya, any Acharya's life, it's always that miracles, awe and reverence the devotees will take and inspire at the initial stage. But when we try to serve the spiritual master, I tend to offend by seeing him as more humanly and thinking like as me or better than me or something like that. So how to avoid this nature?
Well, Shastra warns us to not become too what's the word? I forget the word that I'm looking for, but they warns about the spiritual master. Familiar. Thank you. Yeah. Not to become too familiar with the spiritual master or the deity. You've just been a pujari for so many years, and you just say, okay, well, Hare Krishna. So we do. We're warned in the Shastra about familiarity. That saying, familiarity can breed contempt. So we do need to regularly, if we are serving our spiritual master, we do need to remind ourselves by hearing the Shastra and how one should be, how one should act in the presence of one's spiritual master, so that one doesn't fall into that trap. One remembers, oh, this person, just like Prabhupada talked about this with Jayadvaita Swami in a morning walk in Mayapur, that Jayadvaita Maharaj had the brave to ask the question. Sometimes we see, Prabhupada, that you may forget a verse or quote it incorrectly or this or that. And Prabhupada said that is not the perfection. Don't think like that. That the spiritual master is perfect like that. His perfection is that he's always wanting to serve Krishna. So it doesn't mean he doesn't forget a verse or maybe even make a wrong, what turns out to be not a great managerial decision or something like that. But his intention is always to please Krishna. And that's the perfection of the spiritual master. Not that he needs to wear glasses or hurts his knee or something like that. So we want to remember the right way to see the spiritual master. Is that all right?
Yes, Prabhu. Thank you.
Okay, now we didn't finish this this week, but that's okay, because next week we'll make up for it, promise. But I do want to end on time. I want to be very respectful of all of your times and that it's your japa period right now and my time to take rest. So please accept my obeisances. And just one request, because now we're up to 46. We had 23 when we started. Please, my dear devotees, please come on time. I do. And so if I can, you can. I know it's early in the morning, but it's just good because we covered some really, really important point in the very beginning of the class, and some of you missed that. And so sometimes I'll start with something really important, and it's much more inspiring for the speaker when he sees that everyone's there. With if he's used to 46 people and there's 20 people, it's like, oh, what happened? They didn't like my class, or so please be on time, and we will end on time also. So thank you. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna.
Thank you.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Chittapradalinda Prabhu. Any announcement from your end?
So, Prabhu, we're still working out the modalities of this question paper. So we have set up some meetings.
Then stop the recording, Prabhu. Hare Krishna.
Yes.